The first question we want to address is a fundamental one. What makes up your compensation in tech? So oftentimes in forums like Blind or Reddit or other places, you're going to hear compensation abbreviated as total compensation or TC. I think a lot of you probably know that. But the broader question here is when you get that offer from a big tech company or any tech company, they're going to have a whole lot of detail in that offer letter when you read it through or when you talk to the recruiter. And I think the first IQ test, if you will, is figuring out which components of that offer are actually important to you. So when we think about this, there's so much that goes into compensation: base salary, equity, signing bonus, performance bonus. And these are all things that we'll talk about in more detail, but that's the tip of the iceberg, right? You also have things like 401k match or health insurance or a fitness stipend. And you could kind of continue on with a laundry list of things that, the company will try and attract you with, right? Catered meals, learning and development budget, a game room, company offsites. And so the first thing you have to look at is as you get all this detail, it's easy, especially if you're early on in your career, to kind of get overwhelmed. But really, if you think about it, the way you should be assessing an offer or your compensation is what are the higher order bits? And Alex and I feel strongly that really right off the bat, we can ignore pretty much everything on the right side of the screen. Things like going on a company offsite every month or every 2 months. Yeah, that's important and that's fun and that's great. But in terms of compensation, the value of that perk, the value of that benefit might be $100 or $200 a month. And so if you're making a decision on which job to take based on that, that seems like a pretty foolish thing to do. And so now you're left with this stuff, things like 401k match and pay time off. These are important, right? These actually could have a meaningful impact on your total take home pay, because 401k match at a company like Google or Facebook, it could contribute an extra $7,000, $10,000 to what you're making if you get a good 401k match, right? That actually does become meaningful. But one more lens through which to look at compensation is on what dimension can you actually move the needle, or on what dimension can you actually change the benefit? And so if you look at it from that perspective, you really get left with these top three: base salary, equity, and signing bonus. And equity we'll talk about in a lot more detail. There are three different types of equity that you will often get at a tech company. But the reason that we crossed out, things like performance bonus and 401k match is that they are, again, important. But generally, at most tech companies, you're not going to have an ability to negotiate that, in the sense that it would be kind of weird for a company to say, hey, we're going to give you more 401k match compared to this other employee. And same with paid time off. Those are very standardized. Like maybe, okay, you've been at the company for 5 years, then you get more PTO, but it's not something that you can typically ask for more of, at least in big tech, which are, we have these large employee bases. And so that's the first thing that we want to communicate, which is that there's so many things that recruiters will mention to you on the phone, like, oh, we're going to pay your phone bill every month. We're going to give you sick time, X amount of sick days. But really what you should care about is the components on the left. And then among that, the things that you can have control over to some extent in terms of negotiation are these top three. So when I walk through the details of the cogent parts of an offer, at the end of the presentation, we'll share some tips about negotiation.